undisturbed for millions of years. No native humans. The coldest place on Earth. A beautiful and silent frontier, home to penguins, seals, and whales. Earth's largest freshwater supply. Minerals and other mysteries buried beneath the ice. This frozen continent became a source of conflict over ownership, and then a model of compromise during the Cold War through the Antarctic Treaty. But can this compromise endure? Antarctica is promoted as a continent for science and a haven of peace, yet nations are already pushing the boundaries of the treaty. More international cooperation is necessary to protect the common interest we share in Antarctica. In 1772, James Cook, a British naval captain, began his journey in search of a suspected landmass in the southern hemisphere. Cook sailed just 75 miles short of discovering Antarctica and recorded in his journal that his travels left not the least room for the possibility of another continent. Almost half a century after Cook missed Antarctica, Captain Bellingshausen of Russia sailed around the globe from 1819 to 1821 and spotted islands within the Antarctic Circle. Whaling Captain Nathaniel Palmer of the United States may have been the first man to see the mainland of Antarctica in 1820, but he did not touch land. At the International Geographical Conference in 1895, Antarctic exploration was promoted as the greatest piece of geographical exploration still to be undertaken. The race was on, but the conditions were harsh. Roald Amundsen's team from Norway relied on sled dogs and reached the South Pole in 1911. R.F. Scott and his team from the United Kingdom did not make it home from their expedition to the South Pole. In his last journal entry on March 29, 1913, R. Scott wrote, "Outside the door of the tent remains a whirling drift. We shall stick it out to the end, but the end cannot be far." Although Scott's team had a tragic ending, exploration continued. Nations sent cartographers and scientists. Air flight enabled even more exploration.
The sky is clear. It is the tingling moment. It's win or lose now, life or death. The plane rises slowly to circle Little America and square away for the unknown. It soars over, and Dick Bird says that all he could think of were those plucky shipmates left behind who sacrificed 2 years of their lives to push the quartet over the pole.
Admiral Byrd became a hero for exploring Antarctica and opening bases. These bases became known as Little America. But conflict was brewing, especially between Great Britain, Chile, and Argentina. Who owned Antarctica? One nation, several nations, or no nation? In 1908, Great Britain made claims to the entire Antarctic continent and nearby islands, asserting ownership based on discovery and whaling use. Argentina rejected Great Britain's claims and instead asserted their own rights based on its proximity to the continent and its own occupation through weather stations. Not to be outdone, Chile staked its claim based in part on the continuation and submersion of the Andes Mountains. Despite extensive exploration by the United States, the US government declined to assert or recognize sovereignty claims on the basis that no actual settlement of Antarctica by any nation had occurred. However, Admiral Byrd warned of impending conflict.
Crowded. Are there that many expeditions now there or en route there?
Well, you know, as I said, it's the most peaceful place in the world, but I don't think it will be for long because of this intense interest on the part of other nations and this nation.
In 1948, Great Britain suggested settling claims through the International Court of Justice, but Chile and Argentina declined. That same year, the US proposed no ownership but a trusteeship, which was also declined. In 1949, Australia proposed a regional agreement, again declined. The Soviet Union was not happy with the US trying to steer Antarctic discussions without them and considered asserting a claim. This was all happening during the Cold War, which made cooperation seem next to impossible. Winston Churchill had already warned about an Iron Curtain in Europe. Russia had tested its first atomic bomb. The People's Republic of China was formed, and the Korean conflict had erupted. Intercontinental ballistic missiles became a new source of fear, with children participating in duck and cover drills across American schools. By 1957, 7 nations asserted ownership: Argentina, Australia, Chile, France, New Zealand, Norway, and the United Kingdom. On top of these territorial disputes, Antarctica was ripe ground for military exploitation. President Eisenhower encouraged peace.
I know that the American people share my deep belief that if a danger exists in the world, it is a danger shared by all. And equally, that if hope exists in the mind of one nation, that hope should be shared by all.
In 1959, the United States invited 11 other nations to propose an agreement for Antarctica. All nations accepted, including the Soviet Union. The parties were able to reach an agreement, and the Antarctic Treaty was signed by 12 nations. The treaty provides that Antarctica is to be used for peaceful purposes only, no military bases or weapons. Nations are to freely share scientific information, and all areas are open to inspection. No party to the treaty gives up any previous claims of ownership. No new claims can be made while the treaty is in force. President Eisenhower said that it should be viewed as an inspiring example of what can be accomplished by international cooperation in the field of science and in the pursuit of peace. Treaty drafter Lawrence Gould likened the treaty's historical significance to the Magna Carta. The treaty's impact is evident by the later treaties modeled after it, including the 1967 Outer Space Treaty and the 1971 Seabed Treaty. President Nixon advised that the Seabed Treaty would prevent an arms race before it had a chance to start. It is undeniable that the Antarctic Treaty should take its place in history as a model of compromise during an era of great conflict, but can it stand the test of time? Fast forward 60 years to today. Tourism is rapidly increasing. Climate change concerns are pressing. And as ice melts, minerals, fresh water, and new scientific discoveries become more accessible. If the ban on commercial drilling expires, 200 billion barrels of oil are up for grabs. In 2016, the New York Times reported that China and Russia were drastically scaling up their presence in Antarctica. In 2017, China and Russia defeated a measure to protect wildlife. Just a few months ago, China landed its first commercial jet, expanding the tourism industry in Antarctica. Chinese law professor Guo Peiking observed that China's exploration of the continent is like playing chess. It's important to have a position in the global game. We don't know when the play will happen, but it's necessary to have a foothold. Compromise worked to get the treaty signed, but is it still effective? The treaty does not provide sufficient inspection, enforcement, or government mechanisms, instead relying on each nation to self-regulate. Developments in Antarctica in the last decade suggest that another race is on. The outcome affects each one of us. Before the Antarctic Treaty or its related agreements expire, nations need to compromise once again for the welfare of us all.